Hello and welcome to this Q&A from the Fertility Alliance. Today we are joined by Caroline Andrews from the charity Verity, which is focused on polycystic ovary syndrome or PCOS. Caroline, I wonder if you could start by telling us a bit about the Awareness Month this month and what it's for and what it hopes to achieve.
Hi, Kate. Thanks so much for having me on to speak about PCOS and Verity. So the PCOS Awareness Month in September each year, we actually started off, and Verity is the oldest PCOS charity in the world when it established in 1997. We started off with PCOS Awareness Week initially, and then as awareness organisations grew across the world, it's now become a global monthly sort of project to have a PCOS Awareness Month once a month. And what we tend to do is we look at various issues in relation to PCOS. So obviously fertility is one of them. And a lot of people do discover that they have a diagnosis of PCOS when they are undergoing fertility treatment and the initial tests to see if there's difficulty in conceiving. So we tend to focus on different areas that have symptoms and issues in relation to PCOS. And obviously, PCOS is also a lifelong complex condition and it has many other issues. So, for example, type 2 diabetes, higher risk of endometrial cancer, higher risk of sleep apnea. So, it's about understanding the condition as a whole. The Awareness Month this year, the main focus has to be with ourselves with Verity is our all-party parliamentary group on PCOS. And this has been something that the charity has been working towards for decades. And we managed to secure funding to help support a secretariat company. And so there was formed in April 2025 the All Party Parliamentary Group for PCOS. And that means it's a group of parliamentarians that have interest in PCOS, sometimes from personal interest, sometimes through professional interest, and looking to actually understand and push PCOS on the political and strategic agenda within sort of national policies. And on the 8th September, the inquiry report is being launched, and we're so excited to see the recommendations from that as to what PCOS diagnosis and management needs to look at in the future, and how we can really try and fix PCOS within the sphere of women's health, but the understanding that actually is a complex endocrine condition and that runs across the whole life course of somebody's health. And it's important to understand that this condition affects 4.25 million women and those assigned female at birth within the UK. So it's a massive, massive impact upon the national health perspective.
I wonder if you could tell us a bit about the sort of things that the report might be looking at. What kind of areas have you been investigating?
Well, it's officially embargoed at the moment, so it's coming out formally on the 8th of September. So we can't wait to see the full recommendations. The report did focus on when we had the initial inquiry, and the wonderful thing about parliamentary inquiries is actually a combination of real life personal stories as well as professional input. Freedom of information requests to see how PCOS is utilised and dealt with as a condition across all the integrated care systems across the country. So it's an amalgamation of a patient's lived with experience as well as a professional understanding and as well as the practical context of how PCOS is sitting within, so for example, the NHS, how it sits within women's health hubs, part of the women's health strategy. So we focused, and the inquiry thought it would focus on two areas of diagnosis and management. So that's where we would like to be seeing the recommendations along the sort of route to diagnosis, the time delay to diagnosis, the treatment on diagnosis, the management of the condition, also as well whether there's impact in terms of how different ethnicities are treated within the conditions and are they suffering different sort of approaches by medical practitioners. Are there best practices in the country as to what would be a great model of care? Are there areas that are falling behind? So we're really excited to see the key recommendations from the inquiry, which literally is, well, by the time this is aired, probably days away from being released.
Do people at present have a problem getting diagnosed? Is it often too slow?
It's There's lots of different personal stories around, and I can talk from my personal experience. And bearing in mind, I got diagnosed in 2002, so it's many years ago, more than I care to remember. I dealt with what I think was probably quite a typical diagnosis. And I say that, and when I was actually giving evidence to inquiry myself, it really struck me that actually I kind of felt it was acceptable to have these delays, not being listened to, not being given any action upon diagnosis. So I had many visits to the GP with period problems before I actually got diagnosed. And I was just put on the pill at the age of 16 that deal with the issues. So I had a considerable sort of 5+ years between starting my periods and actually sort of getting a formal diagnosis. I also had the issue that the waiting list at the time with the NHS was so delayed. And again, I appreciate I was in a fortunate position. My parents actually paid privately for my diagnosis in terms of the blood test and the ultrasound scan. And I think without that, the sort of experience probably would have been even worse. And again, fairly typical. I was given the diagnosis and actually handed a Verity leaflet at the stage, which is how I got introduced to Verity, and was told that I wouldn't have children and that was it, which I know is completely inaccurate and wrong, but that was like the level of management and care. And there's sort of very few active and a sort of, I was talking to someone the other day about how many times have I been to the GP about PCOS since diagnosis, and I was like, I don't actually think I've been in years, like that management. So I do think diagnosis has considerable days in betweens of, if you take the diagnosis date as to when you start your periods to actual diagnosis. And the international guidelines are actually quite good on that, in terms of, they say that if you're within 8 years of starting your periods, that actually there could be a potential diagnosis, but sometimes actually to subject sort of young teenage and adolescents to internal ultrasound scans might not be the best thing. So we do sort of see there is some delays, largely because we have this potential diagnosis. Also, as well, because of the sort of joined up approach by medical practitioners. If you're seeing a GP about periods and acne as a teenager, you often get told it's just hormones, whereas actually that could be leading to a diagnosis of PCOS potentially. So there's issues around delay in terms of sort of medical understanding, there's issues in delay in terms of access to care, and there's issues delay in terms of actually being able to go and get those appointments that are needed for the diagnosis. And when you are diagnosed, what happens next? I actually was talking to someone. It's one of my favourite things at the moment. Is in the West Wing, and off a slight tangent. They're preparing for Martin Sheen's character Jed Bartlett as president, and they're preparing for a debate. And they talk about the 10 words, like what's the key 10 words. And actually, I think that's quite relevant to PCOS diagnosis and management. You need those sort of initial 10 words, that diagnosis, but it's what's the next 10 words? What's the 10 words after that? What's the management looking like? What's the long-term health looking like? Are individuals getting diagnosed and being even made aware that this is an endocrine condition that can last the whole life? So it's that sort of not 10 words. We need to know what the next 10 words are, the next step's the next step. And again, that's something that we're hoping the inquiry is going to be looking into.
And I understand you've got a survey out as well at the moment.
We have. We've been slightly saturated by surveys. It's one of these things that actually we have to be conscious of, and it's sometimes the stars align, so to speak. And we do think that actually the stars align for PCOS at the moment. So our survey in terms of the diagnosis and management of PCOS for the National Inquiry into PCOS by the Parliamentary Group is closed. We have a survey out at the moment, which is around the name change of the condition, which is a global initiative. And we also have a survey out at the moment, which is around the James Linden Alliance, which is specific to the UK, which is identifying the top 10 uncertainties about PCOS that needs researching. So I can explain a little bit more about each of those if you'd like. So
Yes,
as I say,
please.
lots of surveys, but all extremely important, and really moving the understanding condition forward. So the name change actually started around 2016, sort of building some momentum. There was a big significant move forward around 2023, and it is really heightening in terms of the understanding that the polycystic ovary syndrome as a name, it can have issues in terms of cultural sensitivity. So, say, for example, is it a barrier to diagnosis and treatment because of the link with fertility, which many patients do? And bearing in mind, PCOS does adversely affect Southeast Asian within the UK and globally. We also have issues around the linking with the idea of polycystic ovaries, that the cysts on the ovaries are what cause the problems. They're not a symptom, but they are the cause. We also have the issue that actually a lot of people link it to ovarian cysts, which are a completely different condition compared to polycystic ovaries. And then obviously that emphasis on the reproductive nature and the sort of fertility element, which I may be speaking to the wrong organisation about this, actually really cements it in that fertility sphere. But as I mentioned, it's to say the cardio and metabolic repercussions and comorbidities are quite significant. The insulin resistance issues, the long-term fatty liver disease, sleep apnea, even if you are pregnant, the maternity complications such as gestational diabetes or breastfeeding. There's a lot around this condition that actually the feeling is, and it's patients and professionals involved, that the name does not reflect what the condition actually is. It doesn't reflect the emotional health toll, the cardiometabolic toll, the physical toll, and really the understanding. And there's a huge amount worldwide about, and again, political and strategy wise, in terms of funding of women's health, understanding of the condition. And it's something that is building, and the sort of feeling from thousands of people have been involved in surveys, such as the one that's out at the moment, which is part of the global initiative. And Verity are one of the sort of co-bodies alongside the CRE Well over in Australia and the APCOS Society, which is the National International Professional Society, that actually the name needs to be reflective of the condition, and it just isn't at the moment. So there's sort of a few different strains of thoughts moving forward that actually the name just needs to be replaced to reflect the actual physiology of the condition. There's the idea that the name could be a complete acronym, or it could be a bit like, say, for example, you've got Alzheimer's, diabetes, it doesn't necessarily explain the condition, or that, and again, in the sphere, there's been a few things around if PCOS is kept but replaced by other words. So that survey's out at the moment, and it's really important. And every country has different obstacles. So, say, for example, in America, they have the obstacles around insurance coding, where PCOS may sit with that, how it impacts it. In the UK, we have the issues around, obviously, the literature of NHS, the whole understanding. And again, there's a lot around it. Have we reached a certain level of understanding globally that would we be taking a step back, or actually is it kind of addressing this issue now in order to be able to move forward and increase funding and understanding of this condition, which, as I say, 1 in 8 globally that it can impact upon, it is huge. And so that survey's out at the moment. We have also got another survey for a James Lead Alliance, which again is something that Verity wanted to do for decades. Doing some fantastic work with James Lead Alliance and Cardiff University. Team at Cardiff have been brilliant with this, and we're looking at, and it's essentially you go through a very rigid structured process with systematic reviews of the literature that's out there at the moment, information from patients as to what they want to be have it identified, looking at what professionals are wanting to be identified in terms of research issues, and it's leading to identifying what essentially is the top 10 uncertainties in research for PCOS. So we're at the stage at the moment, and it's been going on for over a year. And again, wonderful process in that we have a steering group which has a multitude of different professionals. So we've got gynecologists on there, we've got a fertility specialist, we have an endocrinologist, we've got a dermatologist, we've got somebody who deals as a psychologist, we've got patient groups, we've got patient representatives of different ethnicities. So what we're looking at doing, and essentially we've got from thousands of uncertainties identified by professionals and the public. And that's been narrowed down very structurally and systematically to 54. That's now getting narrowed down to 25. And what we're asking at the moment, which is a survey out and all the links are on our page, is that those 54 are narrowed down to 25. And in a workshop in 17th October, which again is a patient and professional amalgamation, are going to be then identifying the top 10 uncertainties. And we really hope, and we've seen the benefit with other conditions. It's the first time an endocrine condition's had this, but we've seen the benefit that actually when you're making applications for funding research, if you can show that this is a James Lind Alliance priority setting partnership uncertainty, you can show that actually it's something that patients want to know about, professionals want to know about. There's a certain level that this is meeting the need to be investigated because there is gaps in research at the moment. So we're really hoping it'll help drive research and funding towards PCOS in the coming years as well.
Really interesting work, and I'm particularly interested in the name change as well. I mean, I think you're right. It's really interesting. I'd never thought before how closely, when we think about PCOS, I mean, obviously we think about fertility, but I think actually probably most people do to some extent. And even when people are diagnosed, often the question that follows that is, will it affect my fertility, rather than will it affect me for the rest of my life? I mean, what are the kind of long-term impacts of the condition?
So, and again, these are all sort of measurable and manageable risks, and everyone's different. It's PCOS has got complex comorbidities dependent upon different individuals. And again, there's lots around it, and this is developing understanding. So, say for example, a lot of patients tend to be referred to the fact that they need to lose weight with PCOS, and that losing weight will increase and sort of improve their symptoms. One of the difficulties around that is obviously there is a difficulty losing weight with PCOS. We don't have the sort of same metabolic expenditure and the energy expenditure. But then again, there's the understanding that actually obesity can increase complications with anyone's health, PCOS or not. Um, Again, it's sort of missing the fact that actually about 50% of those with PCOS are lean women. They're sort of missed out on this cycle. So there's lots of different issues in terms of what can be looked at, and so it's increased. And again, one of the biggest risks are sort of type 2 diabetes because the insulin resistance around PCOS. So having that as a long-term issue, and again, diabetes itself brings a whole load of comorbidities associated with it. Looking at, say, for example, fatty liver disease, long-term health. One of the biggest things as well, and the international guidelines were quite key about this, the impact upon emotional health. I think it was around, and don't quote me the exact figures, but around 70% of women with PCOS have anxiety and depression issues. That is quite significant. I can't do the math off the top of my head, but 4.25 million women in the UK, 70% of those having anxiety or depression issues. And again, potential again with the food cycles, quite a lot of people go onto because they're told to lose weight. Eating disorders sort of coming from it. There's a huge, complex sort of navigated system that people need to deal with, and the way the sort of system is set up is that again we're sort of hoping that the APPG will show this. The diagnosis, and it's kind of come back when you want to have children. That very much was the slant years ago, and unfortunately, it still tends to be fairly common. It's improved. The understanding is a lot better, but people have still been told to come back when they want to have children. Not that actually active management in terms of looking after, and again, good health, looking after your health in terms of PCOS or not can actually improve life in later years. There's some lots of interesting studies out of University of Wolverhampton and Derby around exercise and PCOS and lifestyle. And again, people are looking at the difference of is things like HIIT exercises increasing cortisol and the androgens, or actually, do you know what? Is that just good for your health? How does that all interact? Is strength training better, or the more sort of low impact steady state exercises? So, and the impact that has on your overall health. And I'm a great believer in that there's not one size fit all, but actually a lot of this conversation is about good health generally. And I think I heard this said once, and I think it might have been at the NHS Confederation launch, which looked at the investment of every pound into women's health is a rate of return of £11 into the economy, which I think is a shocking statistic. And we've got a national treatment service. We treat the problems as they arise. We're not a preventative, let's look forward, how can we try and address these issues before they become issues? And again, there's no understanding of that on PCOS within treatment at the moment and management, that actually good management, looking after good health, addressing these issues could actually save the NHS billions of pounds in terms of actually, if people understood the insulin resistance with PCOS, they might not necessarily get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and moving onwards. It's lots of things like that. And again, PCOS and the menopause. Obviously, the menopause is sort of attracting a huge understanding at the moment with regards to women's health, and it's looking at actually what happens with PCOS in later life. It doesn't go away because the hormone balance is there. Because just because you're not having periods, and again, it's that understanding it's not just around the ovaries, but actually there could be greater risks in terms of fatty liver disease, sleep apnea, all those sort of things as well. So it's a real issue as to actually how can we try and address these gaps in understanding for better health overall, just generally, but specifically in terms of those with PCOS.
And if people want to complete your surveys, how do they go about doing that?
So if they go on to there's the Facebook page, the Instagram page, or we've got it on our X handles as well, and also on our website. There's the links for JLA PCOS, or if actually just Google JLA PCOS, it will come up. And then the name change one, again, it's actually hosted outside with Monash University. But again, if you search for our Instagram, which is at Verity PCOS, and that's sort of our handle across a lot of social media, or our website, which is www.verity-pcos.org.uk. There's information and links on there to be able to go and complete them. And we really, really would emphasise that actually. A lot of people think, do surveys matter? And I mean, undoubtedly, I would say they do, because this is about the patient lived with experience. Like, it's so important. And I do think the UK is like leading that charge at the moment on research involving patient lived with experience. It's so vital for people to understand. And I have to say, we're blessed with fantastic researchers in the UK and globally that really want to understand the lived with experience when they're forming their research and actually conducting it, because they want to make life better.
So everyone, if you've got PCOS, go and fill in those surveys right away. And Caroline, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you so much.